Hi everyone, Simon here with a review of The Suicide of Rachel Foster. Suicide of Rachel Foster is a walking simulator styled narrative adventure for PC, Xbox One and PS4, and it's a PS4 version you see on your screens. The game is heavy in atmosphere in a spooky / mildly paranormal way, but it's never jump scary like in a horror way. So if you aren't a horror person, as I'm not, you can get through this game quite happily because I'm a scaredy pants and I was fine. The game sees you play as Nicole, and Nicole is venturing to her old family mountain lodge that ran as a hotel, and the year is 1993. Her parents have both died, and her mum's dying wish was basically to sell this motel and give the proceeds of the sale towards Rachel Foster's family. Why would they do this? It's because Rachel Foster committed suicide because she was in a relationship with Nicole's father. The mum found out, mum and Nicole left. Rachel committed suicide because she was 16 years old and it's a forbidden love because, but borderline paedophilia here. And the dad then goes into a spiral, also then dies. The hotel is dilapidated. No one wants to go near it. It's a horrible memory treasure trove. And Nicole is wanting to get in, do the sale, get the hell out of there. Unfortunately for her, a ginormous storm comes in and basically means that she's stuck there for a while. And her only support is through the very first generation mobile phone that you can possibly have to Irvin, who's a FEMA agent who she'll kind of bounce various ideas on and off of as she kind of processes her childhood issues, mental trauma, dealing with that relationship, which will get sicker and sicker as the game progresses, and kind of falling into and reliving and becoming an abuse cycle herself, which is something I'll kind of discuss towards the end of the review. The game, and I'm going to try and avoid spoilers wherever possible, sees you only play as Nicole, and you'll be doing most of your communication through this kind of walkie-talkie / mobile phone. It's a very similar setup to Firewatch, and if you've played that game, you have back and forth conversation makes up most of what that game was good at. Here, however, there are no dialogue choices. It is literally a back and forth conversation, more as you pick up and discover things, and that then triggers conversations that you can have or you can skip and ignore depending on what's going on. The game's lodge, the mountain lodge, the hotel, is its first crowning jewel of this game and is the best part. It is beautifully represented, excellently put together. It's of that kind of old Shining vibe, I would say, and it's creepy, never jump scary, reminding me very much of how like Silent Hill used to build up atmosphere in everything that's around it. But with this, you can kind of pick up and interact with lots of different things, kind of get little tidbits of knowledge from notes and drawings and paper pads and stuff like that. Gone Home-esque, I would say. However, not everything is pick-upable and not everything kind of really lends itself to the story, but it all creates this beautifully creepy atmosphere. The second jewel in the crown is the sound. And aside from the excellent voice acting, I can't fault Nicole and Irvin throughout. I thought they were great. The sound all the way around you is binaural. And because the hotel is falling apart, because the second floor of the building is kind of open to some of the elements. So there's like snow coming in through some of the gaps in the roof. There's a wing that's kind of been closed off because it's falling apart. But when you get into there later on in the game, it's kind of like damp and mould and everything. There's always kind of wind hassling, a little tinkly of a bell or something like that. Creaks and moans. It is really well put together to keep you in suspense with the atmosphere without ever wanting to do like a massive bang, if that makes sense, to jump scare. It doesn't go down the jump scare route. It tries to take the atmospheric high ground, and it pays off for that regard. However, In terms of actual gameplay, you will just be moving from point A to point B, pressing something to trigger something in the story, and then moving on again. You will have a paper map so that you can kind of walk around and get to know the hotel quite nicely. But it's not massive, so it's not as if you're going to get massively lost in there for too long once you've explored it over a couple of the chapters of the game. It gives you a flashlight, but you don't really do anything with it. It gives you a binaural microphone, which is great for the sound, but aside from that, it kind of doesn't do anything with it either. Same as when you have like one of those kinetic flashlights where you have to keep pressing down and down and down. That could have made such an excellent creepy section, and yet it's wasted. And it's full of loads and loads of good ideas that it never really actuates on. And the same can be said for the story. The story veers into some really weird sympathising with, my opinion, the wrong side of the argument on, is a relationship that is bordering paedophilia just true love, and is that okay? I feel like it borders on the wrong side of that argument, and it goes out of its way to almost make you just like to get your back up and be like, no, I don't agree. Or at least this was for me personally. And I felt that left a really bad taste in my mouth by the time I'd finished the game, to the point where it actually made me feel much more negative about the game and the experience, because it had been a really intriguing slow burn for the first 2 hours, and the final third or fourth hour, awful and woeful. I'm going to pause here and kind of say, go in with your eyes open, expect to be disgusted by the story, but if you're looking for an atmospheric game, this definitely has atmosphere in spades, and kind of leave it there, because what I want to talk about involves heavy spoilers, and I'll kind of do that after the drop. 3, 2, 1. Okay, if you're still here, it's your own fault. Okay, that ending. Fucking hell. Right. I think I get maybe where this developer is coming from and the writer's coming from. Nicole, basically, you have the choice at the end whether or not you're going to commit suicide and join everyone that's died because you're all tainted, as you didn't allow the paedophilic love to continue? What the fuck? Firstly, there is a real issue that I have here with the way how the paedophilic relationship between Leonard the father and Rachel as a 16-year-old is framed as love that they both consented in. Rachel never has a voice during the game. You never hear from her perspective. It's a large flaw in the game, actually, in that the whole thing is titularly about her, yet she never has a voice. You never hear about it. You never see anything from her perspective. She was abused, is what everything in this game points to, and yet every character seems to excuse the fact and keep it almost like it's an everyday occurrence of like star-crossed lovers of 20 years difference or whatever. That is absolute bollocks. It's abuse. It needs to be called abuse, and at no point does anyone in this game call it abuse, and that really infuriates me. I think the reason why it infuriates me perhaps more than some other people is that I was abused as a child, and it's awkward to then have people actively kind of go, oh, but it's just love. No, it's not. You can groom, you can manipulate, and it looks to me like Leonard, the father, was a master manipulator. Whether he meant to or not, there are lines that you do not cross, and they were crossed here, hook, line and sinker. The other reason why I think it's quite interesting is that I'm currently in a bit of an age gap relationship of more than 10 years. And part of that, don't worry, we're in like 20s and 30s, so it's not similar to this in a way. But part of my decision, even with that, was to evaluate actually how does that impact us as a couple in that relationship. you have to actively make sure that everyone is consenting to everything, and that as someone, like, I'm the older one, so I'm actually having to make sure that my partner is living their life in the best way possible, and that they want to participate in things, and that you don't steamroll through life, and that you don't take advantage of things and deny that other person life experiences of their 20s that they would be otherwise missing because they're going out with someone who's in their 30s, has their life relatively settled and sorted, and knows where they're going on their track. Now, obviously, if you align together, that's all good and fine. You can't do that with someone who's a father in their 40s or whatever and a 16-year-old. They need to have life lessons and to get out there and form their own identity. And there's kind of that element to it as well, which I was kind of picking up going, This then leads me to my final point around what I think they may have been trying to do, but have absolutely executed poorly. And this is about abuse cycles. Irvin is unveiled to be a relative of Rachel's, who has been basically marching Nicole around from point A to point B throughout the entire game on this horrific fetch quest of remember what your dad and mum did. Remember, mummy killed Rachel. And she's a villain for that, not also a victim. So as that all kind of gets unveiled, Irvin has actually then become a perpetrator and an abuser in that kind of victim cycle as well. And you, as Nicole, are then becoming the abused emotionally, to the point where the ongoing kind of bullying cycle that constantly reoccurs throughout this game forces people to want to end their lives again. And your final decision as Nicole is to whether or not to commit suicide or not. The problem with this is that if you commit suicide, it's almost glorified as being the free and right version of doing things, which feels not very poetic, considering all you're doing is joining your beloved paedophilic father and the love that he was never allowed to have. Sick and twisted. Or you get to stop the suicide and then you're trapped in the hotel forever because you've decided to stay there forever. But it's not necessarily viewed as the positive ending that it should be. Because for me, it's about breaking that abuse cycle, getting out of your own head, coming and settling to rest with your own inner mental demons, and moving on as being part of the abuse cycle. And it's not given the weight and gravitas that it needed to be treated sensitively. Instead, it is an exposition dump at the end that feels awkward, cumbersome. You can see it coming by that point anyway, but also completely insensitive to all of the topics and the atmosphere and the narrative that kind of came before. And it's just so clunky. And for me, this is almost advocating that your way out of an abuse cycle is to end your life. And I don't think the game really means it to be like that. And I don't think you should feel like that's the only way out. But the fact, and I'm not against games that have bad endings. There are some fantastic games that have bad, tragic, miserable, horrible, melancholic endings. But this one skews the narrative in such a way that it's trying to make you feel guilty for the fact that you didn't accept this paedophilic love, that you should end your life because you ended the lives of everyone around you type thing. And I just think that is some of the worst narrative lines that you could possibly have put in a game that would be played by impressionable, sensitive people in 2020 who will maybe looking at this as kind of a interesting outlet, an exploration of mental capacity and emotional stability. And this does nothing to help that in any way, shape or form. And that's why I absolutely condemn this ending and find it utterly bizarre that it even exists. And it, for me, it completely mars the entire experience of this game. And it's a shame because there's an awful lot there that you could enjoy. But no, left a terrible taste in my mouth by the end. And I'm not a social justice warrior at all. But yeah, creepy, awkward, annoying, skin crawling, and actually very hands-off as a game, despite its magnificent atmosphere. So, apologies for that rant. It's not very often I do these, but I felt called to with this one. It's out now. You guys take care. I'll be putting a written review that will kind of summarise some of these points into something less spoilerific over on higherplanegames.com over the weekend. Until then, you guys take care. Bye-bye. Higher Plane Games is part of the Higher Plane Network, a collection of media projects ran by me. If you like what you see and want to find out more, visit patreon.com/higherplane network. Your support can make so much more possible, be that a like, a comment, a share, or a pledge. Thanks for watching.